Hello. Welcome back to Even More News, the first and only news podcast. Don't look that up. My name is Katy Stoll. Hello.
Hi, Katy. Thanks for having me again.
Thank you.
Like
You're
all
welcome.
weeks. I'm Cody Johnston. It's so lucky that we got in there first.
I know.
And just like, no one else can do it. Sorry, folks.
Nobody else.
The news has been taken.
Trademarked.
Talk about something else.
I'll talk about something else. I'll talk about our guest this week. Host of the podcast Unladylike, and her new podcast is called Conspiracy, she wrote, looking at women's roles in conspiracy theories and modern conspiracy culture. We're very excited to welcome Cristen Conger. Hello, Cristen.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're doing us a big favor, so you're welcome. Jonathan is also here.
Jonathan is also here.
Yes.
Hi,
Hello.
Jonathan.
Hi. I need
Are you
a
feeling great?
catchphrase. It hasn't come. I had all weekend to come up with one and didn't do it.
You got all last week.
I think saying hi in response to Jonathan is also here is like a solid catchphrase.
Great.
See, that's
Everybody-
good too.
I won't be able to
Sound
regret
me.
that.
Sound off in the comments if you want a piece of Jonathan is also here merch. I know you do. You're thirsting for it.
Or Jonathan's fill in the blank catchphrase that he'll debut next week.
Maybe.
Much like I will be streaming music live on Instagram this weekend.
One of these
Jonathan will
weeks.
have his catchphrase next week as well.
You're like the boy, both of you, boy who cried wolves. Wolves. Whatever.
There are many wolves inside me.
If that catchphrase and that live stream ever appears. Lots of stuff to talk about today, as always. Never a dull moment. But first, the holidays, because that's the most important thing.
That's right.
Friday, August 23rd, find your inner nerd day.
That's fine. I'm okay with that. We all got nerdy things. What's like something that you nerd out about, Cristen? Like
Well,
something that's
yeah.
like, because like, yeah, we have got our Game of Thrones, our Star Wars, our little things that we like. But is there?
I mean, I'm not trying to be too on the nose, but do conspiracy theories count?
That was going to be my guess. I was like, well, clearly you're funneling that into this show because
Yeah.
you have this interest in that you're going to
Yeah.
be
You could be a
dissecting.
nerd about anything.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that I am especially nerdy about conspiracy theories because I really was not a conspiracy head before a few years ago when I really just.
When you started nerding out on it?
Yes.
You really started nerding
Yeah.
out?
Was it pandemic stuff where you're like, you got
where I
something
started
to do?
hearing some interesting ideas about children and Wayfair boxes. No, semi-related. It was a friend of mine who had gotten like QAnon pilled, and it rocked my socks.
Yikes.
Yeah.
I would say that is the least nerdy thing I've heard somebody nerd out on, but it counts. And I think it's totally an acceptable answer.
Thank you for validating my nerddom.
Safe space for all types of nerds.
Mhm.
Before we talk about the news and the DNC, Cristen, we wanted to chat with you real quick. Tell us about this new show of yours. Tell us a little bit about some of the conspiracies you're going to be talking about, maybe, if you feel comfortable
Well,
sharing.
I absolutely feel comfortable
You want to go
sharing.
nerd out about it for us?
Yes, and there's a spectrum, of course, of conspiracy theories. There's kind of the hardcore political stuff, and then you've got all your pop cultural conspiracy theories. And what I will share is that conspiracy she wrote, y'all can't see my hands, but they're making
We
a
can.
little bridge. Oh, they can. Hello?
If they're watching the video, they can.
Good to know. Definitely leave that in. Yes, so Conspiracy She Wrote covers both of those as represented by my fingers joining together on this video. And it really takes my other obsession, the thing that I have nerded out the most in my life on, and that's women and gender. I host another show called Unladylike, and I'm always just asking the question of, like, where are women? So when a friend of mine fell down a QAnon rabbit hole during the pandemic, and this was also around the time when Save the Children was taking over Instagram. Wellness circles were getting kind of QAnon-y. I just started looking into like, okay, well, something's happening because women are very much visible and present in this, but there wasn't a ton of focus in the existing academic research on like not just gender and conspiracy theories, but particularly like women's roles in the ecosystems.
I think that's really interesting to me. A lot of times, I think this is changing, but it's always bothered me when people just blanket say women should be in charge, or, men rule the world. Let's give women a shot. Women are loving or whatever. I'm like, you guys are full of shit. Women can be just as evil or, easily manipulated or have their own agendas as anybody else. It's sexist to assume otherwise. Yeah, but that's an overlooked demographic, or women in conspiracy theories and that part of it. Yeah.
Well, and what really sent me, did y'all know this? The Illuminati myth, and the original core conspiracy theory that really kicked up about 100 years ago, was largely like propagated through the work of this female conspiracy theorist / total fascist piece of shit.
Sure.
And there were other like rich white women who were kind of in these social circles and helping spread like super anti-Semitic Illuminati conspiracy theories, like throughout their circles. One of them like was hooking up Henry Ford with all kinds of anti-Semitic literature. So yeah, it's definitely, also a reminder that women's history is not always Yas Queen.
No, that's a good reminder, an important reminder, as we potentially elect a female president. Maybe.
Yeah.
Was this a good transition?
First one.
I think
Perfect.
so.
Yeah.
Well, first off, I would say I'm really excited for this show. This sounds right up my alley and very interesting. And then I'm also going to ask, has anybody seen the DNC this week? Been watching?
Let's talk about the roll call.
Let's talk about the roll call. Do you have thoughts on the roll call?
Listen, I'm talking to you from Atlanta, Georgia. So I'm feeling pretty proud of this one thing.
Lil Jon came out.
Lil Jon.
Yeah.
Georgia was the only state to like have unact.
Yeah. It's wild.
And it was amazing watching him with Raphael Warnock and like all these folks and people were into it.
I like how they tried to incorporate, because he didn't say to the window, but he went like to something Tim Walz, like
that's funny.
Close,
Do you think that he did that because they saw my tweet?
I think so.
I assume it's because they saw your tweet.
I mean, you've got to also watch it just to see the DJ.
Yeah.
Was a DJ in head to toe silk and a straw boater hat.
It's one of those things that is like, there's an element of like no like political convention is ever going to be like, wow, this is like a really cool thing, because it's a political convention. But like you can get to the edge there, you can get really close, and
you can dance right up to it.
You can dance right up to it, and you can crank the music. And instead of like, in contrast, the RNC's roll call vote is just like these guys like, he stole the election, we're gonna take him back, and he gets my vote. Like, it's just so off-putting and boring. And they clearly wanted to put on a show, and
I mean,
they did.
It's a week-long hype party.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're hyping us up.
It's one of those things that like, and this isn't the exact, this is not a comparison, but I keep thinking back to there's a popular clip from the DNC from the 90s. And it's all these politicians from the 90s doing the Macarena while the Macarena plays.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think anyone was ever like, the Macarena is really cool. But so like, I'm like, in like 20 years, what's this going to look like? In 10 years, what's this going to look like?
We are coming up on the last night. For listeners, you've already seen the last night and experienced whatever happens. We are recording this before Kamala Harris's acceptance speech. We are recording this before some special guest shows up, and we are recording this hopefully before a Palestinian-American gets to speak at the convention, though maybe not. And Wednesday night felt like, it was this story of contrasts. right? We were watching this often emotional, inspiring speech by Tim Walz and being painfully aware of the protesters for Palestine being kept outside, who were shunned from the event, told that Uncommitted would not be allowed to have a Palestinian-American representative speak on stage, despite the fact that several people were available who were willing to have their 5-minute speech vetted by the DNC. One of those speeches you can even read online, and it's hard to see what would be objectionable about that.
2 minutes on that speech.
It's
They needed 2 minutes for
honestly
that one.
wild to be. They're just really full steam ahead, barreling through without even acknowledging. I think there's just a huge contingency of people that this is a very big deal, and there are people's lives at stake, and people. It's galling to me that as of right now, the answer is no, and I definitely hope that answer changes.
Yeah, it's no. It's also no without even checking. Like the speech that you can read,
Right.
was rejected, but they didn't read it. There was no like feedback or anything. It was just a blanket like no one is going to be speaking about this.
We were talking before we started recording, the protesters outside listing names of people.
Oh yeah, it's really listing names of people who've died, and just all these sort of DNC attendees is sort of literally just putting their
And I'm like,
hands
what
over
is
their
it?
ears.
What are you afraid of by acknowledging this? We all are aware that this is a major, major, major issue for your base. And what are you gaining? Like what? I know there's some sort of strategy of like, oh, well, they're going to vote for us anyway because we're not Donald Trump. The same is true if you just do the humane thing and acknowledge, right? Like that.
Well, I mean, they can't acknowledge it because if they did, they'd have to acknowledge that they don't care. I mean, the covering the ears kind of demonstrates that anyway, but at least then they can not hear it. But if you acknowledge what's going on, and they also have to acknowledge that it's bad. But if you say that it's bad, then you're saying that like the party is bad on this issue.
You're right.
And they're just terrified of having to do that because also they would also have to, again, admit that like they don't care enough. You can say that they're tirelessly working for a ceasefire, but that's not true.
Well, I also think that part of the strategy is that they don't think that enough of us care about it.
Right.
Because if they did, they wouldn't be doing the typical party election thing, which is let's move everybody to the middle. Like I've certainly not watched all of the speeches, but
this is a little boring.
I watched the Obamas and Walz, and I even watched Oprah's because I was like, why? She was in purple. I loved her purple glasses. Looking gorgeous. But it was just this very impeccable. Like neighbor to neighbor, we are one. If someone's house is on fire, then we're going to do, it doesn't matter what they're doing. And it's like, yes, like I get the function of this. I mean, obviously Lil Jon's appearance worked on me. But
and it works on me now too, by the way. I'm right there with you.
What was also interesting, though, in the roll call, and maybe y'all can explain this, was that I did notice that in some of the states that had uncommitted delegates, that went by really quickly. And there was one state, I don't know which one it was, but the person reading off the roll call even just like clearly, intentionally like said it really fast.
I didn't notice that, but it makes complete sense. My guess is Michigan. But that's sort of what it seems to be like with this speech thing too. I've even seen people say this of like, well, it doesn't matter if they vet the speech. It doesn't matter if the speech is like impeccable and looks like this and doesn't say anything disparaging or whatever, because the fear from everyone running the DNC is that they'll say something that's not in the speech. And they're using it as an opportunity to get on stage and say something inflammatory or whatever. And that might happen. It's interesting that there's this like complete lack of trust there of like, well, the deceitful Palestinian-Americans are going to trick us into getting them to say stop doing the genocide or whatever. And I think that that's probably part of it too. We're like, well, we do the roll call fast because somebody might say free Palestine or something, or ceasefire now or whatever, and create a disturbance.
It's funny because saying ceasefire now is ostensibly what they want as well. It's what
That's
they're
what they
saying,
claim.
even though
Yeah.
they're sending the bombs. But like, that shouldn't be controversial. I think they might be worried that the speaker won't say anything objectionable and might get booed anyway.
That's
Even if they say end the carnage and bring the hostages home, right? Even if they say the thing that AOC said the other day.
It's just so at odds with, like, to your point, Cristen, like, so all of these speeches are about unity and like community and neighborliness, and that's what hits home to me too, especially now that I'm living in the mountains and I live in a small community. When Tim Walz talks about, like, yeah, we don't care, grew up in a small town, and we don't care what your religion is, but you're my neighbor, what you practice, or who you sleep with, or any of that. You're a neighbor, you're our community. And I love this message. This is beautiful and important and true and intrinsically American, in my opinion. And we do not apply that to everybody else. It feels like a real hypocritical thing that's happening with the thing. It feels like hypocrisy. And it feels a little hollow to me as I watch, because there is this giant elephant in the room that everybody in that room is aware of.
It's hypocritical in a way, but mostly it just comes off as like kind of racist. Like the way we talk about this issue so much in the media, especially, but both parties, they don't present or view Palestinians as human beings oftentimes. Even just the way headlines are written about like certain deaths versus other certain deaths and stuff. And that's how it comes off. And like clearly they are doing this sort of calculus. Like, well, we're going to lean in on the Israel side of things, and because we know that we want those votes to stay. And we're going to just sort of be like, oh, uncommitted this, we're going to ignore that. And that's the calculus they've made. They can win with these votes and they don't care about these. But they also will turn around and say, well, you're not, so you're like more, you love Trump because you're not voting or whatever. So they're positioned to blame this group of people who they are choosing to ignore because they view them as not necessary to win. But when they lose, they'll blame them.
Yeah, it's a scapegoat.
It's just this thing that always seems to happen. And yeah, it's like
Even
it is hard to ignore. It's right in front of our faces.
And they already have an out as far as scapegoating should the Democrats lose, and his name is Joe Biden.
I was going to say, yes.
You know?
We're right there, Cristen. Yeah, they do. Absolutely have it. But no, we're busy.
With Joe Biden, it's a similar thing, like the attendees covering their ears and stuff, and like this is not a thing happening. That's the same thing as Joe Biden being old. It's not the same thing. It's much worse what's going on now, but the mechanism and the tactic is the same. And I think that it's so much easier for people to lie and say, actually, he's the smartest guy I've ever met, and he's sharper than me. He gets up, he's awake for 20 hours a day, and he's got more energy than I do. Like, that was the line for so long, even though it was obviously not true. And with this issue, it's I think a lot easier to ignore than to like come up with a lie, because you can't say it's good that it's happening. You can't say that we like it. And so they're sticking with ignoring it and claiming that they are working tirelessly for a ceasefire despite sending them the weapons that are being fired.
It does seem that the DNC and the Harris-Walz campaign could do the bare minimum and kind of coast to the election with it. I obviously want them to do much more, but it seems like they could have a speaker there. They could say, when I get in office, I understand the tightrope, right? She doesn't want to go
Joe Biden is still in office.
And
she is still
she
vice
works for
president.
him.
Allegedly.
Right. Allegedly. But, you can use vague language. The tone shift worked for a little bit So I think she could be able to coast politically without even committing to an arms embargo, though I wish she would, right? Like, it seems like putting a speaker on stage for 5 minutes at 5 p.m. is
Bare
the
minimum.
bare minimum they could do, and it might work.
Yeah.
It would, do a lot to signal to the actually a very large population, demographic of their voters cares very much about this issue. It's the least that they could do and signal to us that we are being heard. But the truth is that I know very little about what Kamala intends to do or what she thinks at this point. And that is what it is.
Maybe we'll find out tonight more.
I hope that we do. Like, there's a good chance that she'll signal some things. Go ahead, Cody.
Well, and that's the thing, like with the signaling, it's hopeful in the sense that, like, oh, we can maybe get rid of Donald Trump forever. Maybe he'll lose and that'll be that. Even though he'll run again in 4 years, obviously. But the bar is so low because it's not Joe Biden, because Kamala's much better at it than she was 4 years ago. Tim Walz is a normal human person.
Charming. I'll say it. Charming.
A very charming, normal man. It's great to have that involved in politics. And so the bar is really, really low, depressingly low, because even there is that heckler, the protester at one of Harris's speeches, and she was like, "Stop! I'm listening. I'm listening. The opposite of that. I'm speaking. And if you want Donald Trump to win, keep talking." Not a great response. The next day, she said something else to a protester, like, I hear you, we're going to ceasefire, some middling bullshit. And people were like, she listened. Like, I think, like, obviously there's way more you can do, but so many people were like, oh my gosh, she's listening. Like, the bar for the adjustment is so low that it would be very easy to navigate this in a way that, again, would be disappointing for a lot of reasons, but it would be helpful for a lot of people as well.
Just anything at all.
I would be shocked if she touched her with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah.
Like, because I think it's also the risk of a vibes kind of election when, like, there is this sense of, like, goodwill and, like, oh, thank God, a sigh of relief that, like, Biden is out. And you cannot discount the power of an historic ticket. Mm-hmm. And the risk in that is that it can create this atmosphere, obviously, where it's like, okay, well, no, you're a party pooper, and so you need to just shut up and talk to me after November. And I just don't know. Like, I just don't see room for it in
it does seem like they're
campaign.
I mean, maybe it will
and
fall
I'm not
apart.
saying, and I disagree.
Of course,
yeah,
we all do here.
It's clearly that's the strategy, is to try to do that, and maybe it won't be able to work out that way, and they'll have to actually address it more. But
it's galling. I don't know the right word eludes me at the moment, and this all has felt a little negative, and for good reason. And I know that might land wrong with people. She's our nominee. We're doing this thing, but I expect more from our party leadership, and that is our job, to be calling this out and having these conversations. And it is a very strange situation that we are in, where we know that the other person is worse.
Much worse.
Fundamentally worse in every way, and would be worse for this cause that we care so much about.
I want to point out that Michigan Uncommitted delegate Abbas Alawiya, who also would be happy to speak tonight, on Thursday night, and one of the founders of the state's Uncommitted movement, told, I believe, the Washington Post, like, I want to feel the joy, and said, of course I will vote for Kamala Harris. Like, he said, like, I'm committed, I'm voting for Kamala Harris. Be that as it may, I can live with the duality of being incredibly disappointed in this and want more, and also, fine, I'll concede the point of, like, well, of course, what do you think I'm going to do? Right? And I think that's fair and fine, and it's still okay to push for more as of course
Absolutely.
we will once she's in office.
In this, peak Dem base situation of the convention, like, it's also too bad, again, asterisk, she hasn't spoke. We have not heard her speak tonight. It's too bad that there's almost not enough trust in the audience to be able to, like, take in, like, maybe slightly nuanced, complex information that might arouse particularly like pointed feelings. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
and that's
so
interesting.
it's just all platitudes.
Like, there's a bigger conversation there that I don't have all of my thoughts formed. But in general, I think that's a problem with us. We should be able to have hard conversations.
Yeah.
We should be able to talk about things with nuance without being called anti-Semitic. We should, or whatever. And it's not
Trump
just this
supporters
issue.
or whatever. Yeah.
Like, all of this, we should be able to have these conversations. Instead, we're afraid of what? The way it's represented in a media headline that gets traction online, of the fracturing, things being so that we need to be able to have these conversations, because nothing is just one thing or another. There's always nuance. There's always something to be explored. And I think that is a real detriment to actually, to everything, to actually making changes, okay?
Because also the Democrats are proudly and vocally the big tent party. Like, that's they love being that, and that's what comes with it. A lot of people are going to have disagreements, and you can do that without voting for RFK or whatever.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You can do that without this specific issue is so heavy and feels like there is a right and a wrong in this. But in general, with different issues, I think it's really quick to become so heated and hateful. Like, if you don't agree with us that Joe Biden is the only person that can beat Donald Trump, then you might as well vote for Donald Trump. Well, fuck off. Like,
Yeah.
I'm swearing too much
It's okay.
this time.
It's okay. It's fucking okay.
But
it's upsetting too, because, like, it's not like we're not, like, bickering over, like, the details of, like, tax policy or something. Like,
We can.
we can, but it's like
Jonathan
about
perked right up.
tens of thousands of people are dying from weapons that we're providing, and tonally we're like, we're working so hard to get that to stop, and the contradiction is so in the forefront. Sucks.
I do want to just mention, I do love Tim Walz, I think. Well, love is strong. I don't think that we should put any politician, no matter how fresh of a politician they are, how normal and charismatic seeming they are, on a pedestal. He is still a politician, and that's just a fact. But I do find him charming, and I think his family is very sweet seeming. I enjoyed his speech very much, personally. And Lil Gus is my hero.
I never thought that hearing an older white man talking in football terms to me would feel this good. Could feel this good.
I know. I resonate. Clear eyes, full hearts, can't lose. Y'all.
I'm like, it's still a crazy game, and what about all that CBT? But I love this.
Yeah, I know. I am here for this. He is someone that I genuinely would love to share a meal with and pick his brain and hear more about his life stories. So I did enjoy it, but as established, it was in stark contrast to what else was happening at the DNC.
That Tim Walz speech could give us an opportunity to talk about how both sides are presenting masculinity, and this idea of this. I wanted to bring this up because Ryan Broderick wrote a post the other day called "The Veep Gender Wars," and the idea is that the backdrop to this entire election, even though a woman is at the top of the Democratic ticket, is like both sides, Republican and Democrat, are presenting these different ideas of American masculinity, and conservatives have tried to own what it means to be a man for years. But then meanwhile, here comes Tim Walz, who is a football coach from the Midwest, who was in the National Guard, who likes classic rock and is like a dad and all this stuff. And it is really kind of breaking, I think, a lot of the right-wing idea of what masculinity is all about, to the point where if he has an awkward movement on stage, people like Jack Posobiec will be like, this is what they want to turn men into. And it's like, your guy can't order a donut at a donut counter. Your guy being JD Vance. The other guy's a whole other story.
Like, it's so funny because the guy at the top of the ticket like jerks off a bunch of dicks to YMCA. Like, that's his whole thing.
He
right?
is so lumbering and awkward. Like,
but like, to your point, it's just any movement, any sort of like sense of like excitement, or joy, or anything that isn't this sort of like, I'm a serious I'm the stoic one. It's presented as like, look at this like female vice president, and it's so off-putting, I think, hopefully for a lot of people, because he's so normal, and the contrast is just so clear. Even like we talk about the Gus too, just like this, like clearly he has a really sweet relationship with his children, and contrast that with JD Vance talking on the phone with Trump and telling this kid to shut up about Pokemon. Like, I don't know. It's very.
Yes, you do. You know.
Yeah, I know.
It is interesting. They're grasping at straws here, as to how to attack Walz. I think. I know that they have the whole like, oh, he's misleading about his army service, or I've seen the latest one was like, he lied about the IVF. No, he didn't. His wife got IUI, which is a less recognizable term for fertility treatment, or a part of fertility treatments. I just learned about it recently, as more of my friends are starting that journey for themselves. You start IUI as an option. And don't ask me to explain it because I don't know. But it doesn't matter. It's the same. Stop swearing, Katy. It's the same thing. You know, but yeah, you could frame it as he's not a masculine man. What do you mean? He served in the army. He was a football coach. Here's my version of masculinity that I love. What he says in the speech last night. I think he said it in the speech last night, unless I just heard it from somebody. That when they started the gay straight alliance, or whatever they called it at his high school, he volunteered himself to lead it because he thought that would go better, specifically because he was the football coach. He thought that that would say a lot, a testament to these students. If the football coach went out of his way to lead this group, that's an incredible insight. And yeah, that is masculinity. That is saying, like, let me be a leader for my school. I'm secure in who I am.
Not even a leader necessarily. It's more just sort of like stepping into and accepting like a supportive role.
Yeah.
Which I think really also helps with, like, that is his role on this ticket. He's the vice president. He made that very clear even in his meeting when with Kamala, when they, like, for the interview of like, what do you need me to do? I'm here for you. And he seems to have that about him, where he doesn't, it's like, it's not a beta mindset, but it's not an alpha mindset. It's just a sort of like what he talks about with like community and neighborliness and stuff, and being able to support other people. It's very refreshing to see.
Absolutely.
I think he's a legit public servant, to use like old school term. What's also so striking about the kind of, what's the opposite of toxic? Healthy masculinity that
not toxic.
Yeah.
Nutritious.
Non-toxic, organic, certified masculinity. Yes, very grass-fed masculinity that he has been kind of embodying is, think about the policies that he's kind of touting the most. It is child tax credit and feeding kids. He's talking very easily and openly about reproductive rights, infertility. Like, this is a man who actually truly seems to give a about not just his family, but like kids, women as people, not just like as the husband of a wife and the son of a daughter. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. And like I
That last
even
one
as
didn't
we're
work.
talking about this and framing our conversation about Tim Walz with this, I feel a little like I hate the framing of a masculinity conversation at all. However, the other side is having that conversation, and so that's why we're doing this. And as you were just speaking, it occurs like, okay, what is this traditional idea of masculinity? Is it to care for your family, right? To, protect your women, protect your children, and yet
To provide.
to provide. And it's so twisted right now, this whole conversation of what it looks like to be a man, and you're like, oh, it's guns and getting women, and women should do what I want. That's not the fucking point. It's to be a good man. It is to take care of. And that is why, to me, Tim Walz, at least this, again, he's a human being that I don't even know. This is just what I'm seeing. We're doing our best to surmise as we get to know this person. Like, yeah, I feel like you exemplify that.
Yeah. And it's convenient that his opponent is the polar opposite of that. If it were anybody else, it wouldn't be as stark a contrast. It would still be effective because, again, like the Republican Party has forced this conversation for so long. They've put their flag down and they've committed to it, and all the discourse over the past however many years has been like about this. They love the Andrew Tates of the world. It's been a part of them, and now the conversation is forced to be had, and it's very convenient that this JD Vance, who's been like kind of like just living in that soup for so long, is the guy who has to eventually talk to Tim on stage and try to be normal against him. And I don't think that's going to work. Again, Jonathan, he can't even order a donut properly.
Do you guys want to watch it?
We can watch it.
Well, we can watch it, but I also want to watch the clip of
They're
Trump
quick. We can do both
on
that's
Theo Von's podcast.
That's a very masculine.
Wait, oh my
Well,
God.
it's one
Trump went on
person-
Theo Von's podcast?
Yeah.
I thought it was
Cool.
AI at first. It's so
Cool.
weird.
I thought it was clipped together, yeah. But it's a JD Vance being really awkward and not normal at all, and Donald Trump being weirdly normal-ish.
I hate to show Midas touch here, but we'll just show the video.
So I'll just say this. So as we see, somebody's in the video says, I don't want to be on camera. And JD Vance, a very responsible person who's aware of his environment and is the vice presidential candidate, is like, oh, we'll just edit it out. So they keep filming. I feel like if Tim Walz did this, he'd be like, oh, we just won't do the cameras. And he would have a conversation and they wouldn't have to like force this weird clip to exist. But the people sharing the video, the original clip is not edited. It's just her face in the video. So
That's why
Midas Touch is the only one I've seen that has actually downloaded the video and then added a censor blur over her face. So.
The zoo has come to town. Thank you for letting us come in here.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, man? Okay, yeah. She doesn't want to be on film, guys, so just cut her out of anything. Appreciate that, man. I'm JD Vance. I'm running for vice president. Let's see.
Okay.
Okay.
Working.
I'm in here.
Take your hands off your fucking hips.
For this year.
Okay, good. How about you, sir?
Almost 2 years.
Okay, good.
Okay,
Almost
good.
everything. Yeah, a lot of glazed here, some sprinkle stuff.
Some sprinkle stuff.
Whatever
makes sense.
About 4 years? Okay. How long have you been here?
Whatever makes sense makes me laugh so much.
What is the point of this video? A man of the people?
Well,
Whatever
he
makes
only knows how to
sense.
ask like time questions. How long has this donut been here? How long has this
And
door
you
been
can
open?
tell-
How long have you had
Yeah.
glazed?
This is going to be a very niche thing. This is like an improv student who's like been getting notes so long, he's so in his head. So he's like, be normal. Just order donuts like a normal person. You could do this. Talk to people. You've been doing this your whole life. All right. How long have you been here? 6 months? Okay, good.
Good.
Some glazed cinnamon rolls. I don't know. Whatever. Whatever makes sense for
Whatever
a
makes
donut
sense.
box. What are you talking? Just some random. I don't know.
Honestly, this is me trying to small talk at like at a party, but I don't want that from a
Yeah.
vice president.
I feel like this is.
I'm running for vice president. Okay.
God. Well, okay. Her okay is amazing because she knows who he is. And
Maybe.
but like whatever makes sense. Some glaze, some sprinkles, a couple of ones with filling, like
bear
variety, bear claw. Like, do you have a variety pack? Do you have like a variety? Like,
He
you have
was
a plain
probably
thing, or
panicking.
he was panicking to order donuts on camera, like a millennial. They can't order anything. They can't talk on the phone these days. Like, just
I
want to
watch the other one.
Like, just don't go out. Don't have him go out. Don't have him go out anywhere. This clip is amazing to me because it's so weird and awkward. It shouldn't exist. He should know by now that he needs to interact with human beings on the campaign trail with cameras rolling. That's something that he agreed to when he said he would be on the ticket. So he's going to this place and he's just like going down the line asking how long people have been there. The most uninteresting question you could possibly ask somebody. You're running for vice president. That's your in. Like, Cristen, your point, like, you're not at a party. You're not feeling awkward. You're not like, oh, I don't know, what's conversation and small talk. You're running for vice president. Ask them things they care about.
About their
think
gender.
you would-
What's
What's
an
your
important
favorite
issue for you?
donut?
Like, what's
your favorite donut?
What's
Which
your
one
favorite
should I
donut?
get? It's a very basic.
right?
if you could
like,
choose one donut for me, what would it be? Like, I anything that's more charismatic. But he didn't have a plan when he walked in there, or if he did, it went out the window.
So now for some real men. Theo Von and Donald Trump talking about
this is-
cocaine.
Amazing.
Well,
No, I would just do cocaine. That was really, yeah. So not just, yeah.
That's
And it was-
that's down and dirty, right?
Yeah, and this is, I mean, it was, yeah.
But you don't anymore?
No, I don't do it anymore, man, and I'm not doing
Is
it.
it too much? Too much to handle?
Some of the stuff started to get a real rattle in it, too. I don't know where we were even getting it from in this country, but yeah, it started to make me feel like I was a mechanic or
So
something.
the thing you go back to then is alcohol for the most part.
Right, yeah, but what I want probably is cocaine, but I know that if I have a drink, then it'll be like, okay, well, I had a drink, then I can do this.
Is cocaine a stronger
Oh, yeah.
up?
Yeah,
Here it
yeah,
is.
Yeah.
So,
Cocaine will make
you're way up with cocaine more than anything else you can think of.
Cocaine will turn you into a damn owl, homie. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You'll be out on your own porch, you know. And you'll be your own street lamp. You're freaking.
And is that a good feeling? Well,
No,
it's
horrible.
a miserable feeling.
But you do
as
it anyway, just like the guy you're saying with the scotch.
Amazing. Cocaine will turn you into a damn owl, homie. Be your own street lamp. Is something I'll never forget. I did think that this was fake, and it
Yeah.
isn't. It's just totally extracted from the Fuller interview. And this is neither here nor there, but it is an important point I need to make, is that Theo Von very much reminds me of Keith from, what's the show? Righteous Gemstones.
Righteous Gemstones.
So to anybody that's watched that show, as soon as I've said it, I know you're going, oh, that's what he reminds me of, because he is Keith.
And by the way,
Again.
this is on Theo Von's podcast. This isn't on Donald Trump's podcast, which you might have not known, since he's asking someone questions and seeming interested in
About
the answers.
What
themselves.
a weird.
Yeah.
That's
which
why
I don't think
part
I've
of the
ever
reason
seen
why
before.
I know. That's why I thought it was fake
True.
at first. I was like, this.
Yeah.
What?
He's shown this like very, very few times where like he is like, oh, this is like a normal conversation where you're asking a person about themselves and you're like, oh, what's that like? It's very funny that the topic is cocaine.
It
and
is.
he's showing so much interest, like as if Theo's a human being, because he could have had this conversation with his shitty son for years. But he apparently has not decided to talk to Don Jr. about this topic.
So
Or
I've-
anyone in New York City in the 1980s, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah.
He's never seen the stuff.
Never
y'all.
seen it.
Like, he doesn't drink usually, and I believe that he's never done cocaine. Like, he doesn't want to be out of control. He needs to know what's going on at all
But
times.
he knows it's stronger than alcohol, right?
He knows
He's
that,
got to
yeah.
know that cocaine does something different than alcohol.
I just
That's
love
fine.
Theo's phrasings. It started making me feel like a mechanic. So good.
Unbelievable.
Like every sentence that comes out of his mouth is like, that's a new sentence. It's amazing.
I'm not going to go as far as to say I'm a Theo Von fan now, but he did make me laugh.
It's
He
funny.
made me laugh.
He had Bernie on his podcast recently too.
He
That
had
was
Bernie.
really good.
Yeah, I like that. All of these spaces where people people compare Theo Von to Joe Rogan, or at least the earlier days of Joe Rogan. So I'm like, but I do actually appreciate you had Bernie on last week. Great. And apparently I haven't seen that one yet, but
there are some
it's the same
interesting
energy.
clips of that one because they're agreeing on stuff. The clip I saw was Theo Von talking about how people are burdened by medical debt in our society, and Bernie listens to Theo Von kind of go on a rambling description of it, but then Bernie brings it home and says, "I think you're absolutely right, Theo. It is absolutely unconscionable that and he does his whole thing. He like puts himself out there, and he got a lot of flack for this, I think, by going on Rogan in 2020 and getting the quote unquote Rogan endorsement that he couldn't accept. But I do think Bernie will go to places that other people maybe won't or can't for various reasons.
We should
and hear what they say and be able to frame it in the view and the position that he's been trying to.
But it is
preach
kind of
for so long.
people have a niche where they can do that. Like Pete Buttigieg last night says, "Hi, I'm Pete Buttigieg. You might know me from Fox News." And Bernie Sanders
Good
goes,
line.
"You might know me from everyone's podcast. I'll go on and I will talk about the issues. I stay on
know me
message
from
like
my
nobody
mittens."
else." My mittens, yeah.
What was also wild about that Bernie interview was that after he answered the medical debt, Bernie was then like, "And we can't discount cocaine debt." And they went off on cocaine.
Wait. That's funny.
Too many people are in debt from spending everything they have on cocaine. Everyone's being a freaking owl, homie.
Yeah.
Everyone's acting like mechanics.
Your own street lamps.
You guys have been sleeping on some Bernie impressions, and I'm into it.
You've never asked, Katie.
Speaking of medical debt, Joe Biden previously said that he was going to get rid of medical debt, and I'm wondering if that will be a part of the platform.
Well, Tim Walz told me she's taking on Big Pharma and is going to lower my prescription prices. That's all I know.
Oh, yeah.
Middle class
Has been
tax
very
cuts.
thin on policy.
Yeah.
Very thin. Very thin on policy.
No more abolishing the death penalty, apparently. Few issues with...
And why, something like that, why do you need to go out of your way to pop that?
Just leave it in. No one was complaining about it.
Yeah.
No one...
We weren't on your case about it.
It wasn't an issue until you made it an issue by removing it.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of weird unforced errors going on right now, and one hopes that the vibes will keep that afloat.
This is the election full of unforced errors. I mean, it was almost an unforced error keeping Joe Biden in, and I feel like the Harris-Walz campaign would need a couple of these every month to not have an advantage going into November. But we'll see. Lots
and an
can
extra
happen.
advantage being that it happened so soon, so the actual election is a lot more truncated.
Yeah, this is,
which is nice.
Not a real conversation topic. Did you see that clip on Twitter? Maybe it is Chris Hayes. People were giving him shit for saying that Joe Biden has a big ego. And he did. He was like, Joe Biden has a huge ego. Let's not forget that. He's a public servant and he's done a lot of things, and and then everyone was aghast. I'm like, I'm sorry. This is we should be able to be honest. Yeah. Obviously he does. Otherwise we wouldn't be in the situation of him dropping out at the last minute.
He wouldn't have been the president ever.
Yeah. He wouldn't have been the president ever. But then, Lawrence O'Donnell's in terms of politicians' egos, I would say he was more of a 5 or whatever. And then people are going to be
every president is a 10. If you think you can run the nation and, in a lot of ways, the world, you're a 10.
It's just so
maybe higher,
weird to me. But also just the fact that Joe Biden, from all reporting and the best that we understand, up until the day he dropped out of the race and supported Kamala and saw the outpouring of support, his whole I thought it was I'm the only one that can beat Donald Trump.
He said
it's
on
hubris.
Camera to the nation that he wouldn't drop out unless God told him to.
I know.
That interview, y'all.
What do you mean he doesn't have an
roof.
ego?
We're
Unreal.
podcasters, and podcasters are at an 8 minimum. Politicians are a 10, and the only person who could force him out is and God is an 11, and Nancy Pelosi. Those are the only two 11.
Because I do think, I mean, I know that some people have said like, oh, we didn't actually have COVID, but COVID also, I think, was a real win knocked out of his sails. And I'm not saying hashtag thanks COVID,
But
the timing did seem to.
That's a hashtag.
Just don't say
Tough
that
to use for
the only
any
person that's
occasion.
gonna like get you to drop out is God and then get COVID immediately.
well,
Just don't do
maybe
that.
God
maybe
didn't
like
drop out.
what she heard.
there we are. Other things going on. RFK Jr. is probably going to drop out soon and apparently is negotiating with Trump, who endorsed Trump. Do we think that there's more voters that he's poaching from the left or the right? I think the right.
Oh, 100% from
I don't
the
think
right.
he's poaching that many voters at all.
Yeah, I mean that's the risk. Is like it's from a few, and then if he endorses Trump, some will do that. But a lot of people are like, I'm not gonna vote for Trump. I
Right.
didn't want to. That's why I
I
wanted
was
to vote for this other
considering
guy,
voting
right?
for you, but yeah.
We'll see. But
I don't think it makes.
It's very funny
I don't know
that
that it moves the needle.
he's been trying so hard. Like he had that conversation with Trump to like try to get a position in the cabinet for an endorsement, and then he also tried to get a meeting with Kamala Harris to try to give her an endorsement for a cabinet position. And it's just like funny. It's like, I'll endorse whoever hires me. It's like, all right, so what do you believe in? I don't think an endorsement from him is very strong. I don't.
No.
I mean, it might work for some people, but just the fact that he's been trying to get any job and endorse whoever gives it to him maybe speaks to the weakness of his convictions in terms of who would be the better president.
I agree with you completely. Cristen, it was so nice having you here with us. Next time, we need to talk more about conspiracy theories and less about the DNC. But please tell our listeners where they can find you, when your new show comes out, where they can listen, all the good stuff.
Well, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Thank you again for having me. I was about to dive right into my plug. So rude. This has been a lot of fun. And listen to Conspiracy, She Wrote everywhere. Everywhere. Listen to it on individual, all the different apps you can. And it's out. The latest episode is Taylor Swift Psyops.
Okay, this sounds fun.
Possible surprise guest speaker at the DNC tonight, Taylor Swift.
That's right. I mean, fingers crossed. She also mentions Conspiracy, She Wrote.
Yeah.
Would love that
I would like to
endorsement,
announce
too.
something everyone thinks it's a Reputation Taylor's version. She goes, I'm announcing, they talk about
There's
me on
a
this
new
podcast.
But yeah, take a listen. New episodes are out on Thursdays. And you can also listen to my feminist lifestyle podcast, Unladylike.
Heck yeah.
So thanks, y'all.
Thank
Good.
you. Thank you, Cody. Thank you,
You're
Jonathan.
welcome.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Benny.
you.
He's not here. That's my dog.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you,
The
listeners.
Lord Almighty for
Thank you to the Lord
getting Biden out
Almighty
of
for
that. Yeah.
getting us through. Oh yeah, getting Biden out.
Thank you, Lil
Prayers.
John.
Thank you,
Thank
Lil
you, Lil
John.
John.
From the windows to the walls, y'all.
Mm.
And you know what? I got to tell you this,
You gotta tell
and it's the truth.
It's the
And I
truth.
mean it every time I say
Every
it,
time
and I
you say
mean it right now. We love you very much.
it.